Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Members of Lethbridge City Council are sending a letter to Premier Jason Kenney outlining their concerns of future coal projects in the Alberta Rockies. Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder received a shadow cabinet position from Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole. And our country's top doctor says provinces need to use caution as economies are slowly being reopened across Canada.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The province announced today that it'll be providing $1,200 each, or $465 million, to 380,000 public and private sector workers in Alberta in the form of a critical worker benefit. It'll include workers in healthcare, social services, and education who deliver critical services to Albertans or support food and medical supply chains. As for immunizations, health officials say around 37,000 Albertans have now received their COVID-19 vaccines, including 71% of residents in long-term care homes.
These people are most at risk of severe outcomes, and the rest will receive vaccines in the coming weeks, according to their immunization schedule. Others who are 75 and over, who live in supportive living sites not in the designated category, will be offered immunization when enough vaccine arrives to begin the seniors' immunization rollout.
Dr. Hinshaw adds that there are currently 5,706 active cases of COVID-19 in the province, and fortunately, more than 120,000 Albertans have now recovered from the virus. A Calgary-based harm reduction society is seeking permission to distribute clean needles and other items to prevent sexually transmitted diseases among the most vulnerable in Lethbridge. HIV Community Link has applied for a development permit from the City of Lethbridge to operate what it is calling a resource centre to provide harm reduction and needle distribution to Lethbridge residents. A Lethbridge lawyer, however, is one of many fighting against it.
I think somebody should force the federal government, to be honest, and the provincial governments to truly fund treatment. These facilities that are popping up all over Canada, what they call harm reduction centers, or what we used to have as the SCS, they're really saying, we're going to try to keep people alive until they can get better. Well, without treatment, these addicts don't get better. And those centers don't provide any substantive treatment. And in the meanwhile, the people that are but those centers, they're trying to make a living, they're doing all the right things, they're being hurt, just like the addicts are being hurt. Who doesn't get hurt? People in nice, safe communities, parts of Lethbridge. They're not building this in the crossings in Lethbridge where they just built the ATB Center. They're not building this next to, Costco or Home Depot.
According to its website, HIV Community Link currently provides supports for those suffering with HIV, AIDS, and hepatitis C, and provides sexually transmitted disease testing. The organization also provides connections to services such as addiction treatment, housing, and employment services. The 1976 coal policy, which was originally rescinded by the UCP government, was reinstated this week after many Albertans expressed disapproval for open-pit coal mining on Category 2 lands. While these projects are currently prohibited, the City of Lethbridge worries about additional mines in the Castle Mountain region, including the Grassy Mountain Coal Project. Council voted unanimously to send a letter of concern to Alberta Premier Jason Kenney, along with other provincial and federal ministers.
Our main concerns stay the same with whomever is making the decision how it is. It's about the water quality, it is about public consultation, and it is about making sure the voices of Lethbridge residents and the concerns we have are heard by the other two orders of government. Because the one thing we know for a fact is that there is no science for taking selenium out of the water at the water treatment level. So there is no way we can remove it if it comes down the river. And so we just need to be very assured that it isn't coming into the river.
The Grassy Mountain Coal Project in the Crow's Nest Pass is currently under federal review, and the results will be released sometime in June. The municipality of Wood Buffalo unanimously approved a motion to provide notice to Alberta Health Services that the regional 911 Emergency Communication Centre will no longer transfer the 911 calls to the AHS Provincial Dispatch Centre. The news comes after AHS flipped the switch on integrated EMS systems. Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman says he stands with Wood Buffalo and is prepared to put forth a similar motion. Spearman, along with Fire Chief Mark Rathwell, says there have been extreme delays in emergency calls since the switch.
It appears they're struggling with trying to get ambulances to the correct address. Multiple requests to people, so we've had public input on this that they've said, I've given them the address 3 times and they still sent the ambulance to the wrong location. So those types of issues, when we receive that information, we're sending that off in a report quickly back to HS so we could try to get answers and try to resolve where those problems or those hiccups in this path are.
I share his frustration. We've written letters to the Premier, we've written to the Health Minister, and we really haven't had any responses that make any sense. We've had 0 response from the Premier, and basically the Health Minister has ignored us. His letters just simply say that he hasn't changed his mind, and he demonstrates no understanding of the issues as the Chief has explained them.
Mayor Spearman says that before proposing a motion, he will need to work with local fire and EMS services to get their input. Lethbridge police have ruled the death of a 65-year-old city man a homicide. Police responded to a home in the 1200 block of 4th Avenue South at 1:18 a.m. on Monday after a report of someone screaming for help. They discovered the body of a man inside of the residence. The death was confirmed suspicious, and the medical examiner's office in Calgary confirmed the cause of death as a homicide. Police have arrested and have taken a man into custody in relation to the ongoing investigation. Lethbridge police say a convicted violent offender who has been released has set up shop in our city and is a high risk to reoffend. They say 42-year-old Jeremy Empelkamp, who was recently released from the Mountain Federal Institution in BC after serving 4 years for assault, has a history of violent offenses, and police want to inform us that he may reoffend. Police say Empelkamp will be subject to multiple monitoring conditions upon his release from custody. Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Harder has been given a shadow cabinet position by leader Aaron O'Toole. Harder will become the party's new shadow minister for digital government. Harder says her focus will be on ensuring Canadians receive the most effective and efficient government services while safeguarding personal data.
Yeah, so we certainly see cases where Canadians, I would say, are being taken advantage of, where their information, whether it's photos or something they posted, personal information, their data is being collected and then it's being used for corporate purposes. So essentially what we're talking about is Canadians are being exploited online, and that's not fair to them. It's not right. And so, again, as the shadow minister, it's my responsibility to hold the government to account and to make sure that the highest ethical standard is being demanded of these corporations that are functioning online and taking people's information.
Bridge City News has been bringing you accounts of travelers who've been forced into detainment after accidentally taking the wrong COVID-19 test when arriving back in Canada. Now, we spoke with one diabetic man who had to travel to Holland for his father's funeral. He says he tried to relay his health condition to the people holding him in detainment for 4 days near the Calgary airport. He says there was no revision made to his daily menu that would accommodate his dietary needs.
Because I'm a diabetic, I'm not really allowed to eat really sugary stuff. The first thing they gave me in the hotel when they locked me up, they gave me a kind of a bag with some chocolate bars and canola bars and stuff like that in there that I shouldn't eat at all, but that's what they gave me. And the meals is pretty much have all kinds of stuff on there with sauces and stuff like that, but I can't actually eat. No communication whatsoever. They just say you're getting detained and we bring you to a hotel, let you sit there for 3 days before we even going to test you. Yeah. And you're just sitting there. You're not allowed to leave because they say if you leave, we put in a warrant out for your arrest and then we're going to put you in jail.
Political reporter Brian Lilly says these facilities Canadians who are arriving back into Canada are being whisked away to are not exactly resorts.
And so these people are landing, they present the paperwork and they say, but that's not good enough. You need a PCR test. You're going in that hotel. Now, my understanding is that right now they're not getting the $2,000 hotel bill that the feds have promised will be coming. So they're not having to pay for it. But you are not allowed to leave. There are security guards everywhere. You don't get to choose the food you eat. They just drop some food off. It's not exactly what a lot of people would be expecting. It's been quite the shock to anybody whose story I've heard.
Catch the full interview with Mr. Lilly, who will also have an update on the vaccine shortage in our country. That's coming up later in our newscast. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canadians returning to Canada can and will be fined for not getting a COVID-19 test. Trudeau says quarantine hotels for returning air travelers are not detention centers, but are simply a necessary health measure.
In cases of no test to show, apply a stiff penalty, a fine, and demand and ensure a rapid and complete follow-up to make sure that they are getting tested, that they are being properly quarantined, that they are not putting at risk the safety of other Canadians by returning home without a clear negative test. I think it's extremely important to make a clear distinction that these aren't detentions. These are medically based isolations. On the 3-day quarantine, for example, that is the average time for a PCR test to be returned. It's the expected amount of time in which a returning traveler might have to stay in the approved local airport hotel. But indeed, if it only takes 24 hours to get that PCR test back and it comes back negative, they are going to be free to go home and continue their quarantine as mandated at home.
Safe Haven Women's Shelter in Taber, Alberta says that the pandemic stress, job loss, and isolation have become the perfect storm for increased calls of extreme domestic violence. The shelter has been able to house women at just half its capacity because of health restrictions. Now there's a way you can help. The Sill and Soil in Taber is hosting the Little Box of Hope for donations. The nonprofit has sold out of its Valentine's fundraiser, which will see hundreds of roses given out locally.
We offered delivery services to Taber and Coaldale area, but then we also have branched out to Lethbridge. We received a significant amount of requests for Lethbridge deliveries. So we had a teacher reach out in Lethbridge that wanted to deliver single roses to her students. So we were going to be doing that. We had a significant amount of businesses in Lethbridge, as well as Clearview Lodge and Taber requested like 73 single roses for their residents. So we're going to be doing that as well. We're going to be busy.
Valentine's Day is about sharing and showing love to those around you. And after a difficult year, it's more important now than ever to spread the love to one another. House of Cars curated a list of locally owned restaurants to support while simultaneously hosting a contest where you can treat your loved one to a delicious meal.
We decided to do a contest here right before Valentine's Day where we wanted to give back to the people in the community, as well as we wanted to give back to a lot of these restaurants which have been shut down for quite a while. So we went out and bought $1,000 worth of gift cards for 4 different locally owned restaurants in town. Earl's is one of them, Italian Table, Moxie's, and Firestone. Any of our customers that come in for a test drive and any of our customers that end up purchasing a vehicle get entered into the draw. Obviously, our customers that did end up purchasing a vehicle, we are giving them extra entries into the draw as well. So we're doing a Facebook Live when we do the actual draw, so people could go back, watch our Facebook page and watch that. We also phone the customer as well.
The Community Foundation of Lethbridge in southwestern Alberta say they've teamed up with the federal government's new Healthy Communities Initiative. This is a partnership with the Canadian Urban Institute and community foundations across Canada to provide $31 million in grant money to help local infrastructure projects during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Community Foundation of Lethbridge will support the Southern Alberta Coalition, which includes initiatives from Red Deer all the way down to the Canada-US border.
We've lost a lot due to the pandemic, and we're still, even though it's 2021, we still can't gather. So part of this is to help facilitate, whether it's, gathering safely in public spaces or gathering digitally through online technology, and being able to support some of these projects that could come forward to improve options to gather and meet as a community. I think that's really important for everyone's mental health and well-being.
The first application deadline for Healthy Communities Initiative is March the 9th. With the province announcing that fitness centres can reopen in Alberta for one-on-one training as part of Step 1 relaunch strategy, Lethbridge College will be offering free fitness centre memberships for the winter of 2021 semester. As Micah Quinn reports now, one of the main reasons that this initiative was brought forth was to offer more mental health supports for students.
In the 2020 fall semester, a survey was done at Lethbridge College to see what challenges students are facing during the COVID-19 pandemic, and mental health was one of the top reported problems. One of the solutions was to offer free fitness center memberships for students to access one-on-one personal training sessions.
And we thought, with everything going on, why put that extra burden on, possibly having to pay for a membership for just the one term? So we talked it out, and it's an extension of a goodwill gesture.
Being able to bridge the gap between physical and mental health was one of the top priorities for this initiative.
You've got to be able to offer something that, a lot of people are going to learn, but have to vent and deal with a lot of things in different ways. And so by us being able to provide this opportunity for the students and staff, it puts that ability to just let go at some point.
Sessions were booked for one-on-one training only a day after the announcement went out.
We're booked steady up into next week. So there's about a week in advance that we have for openings and training, and it's been booked solid. So very positive feedback. Right now, I'm putting them through a workout, but also using this time to educate them on proper technique, sets, tempo, reps, so that when they come in on their own, they're comfortable doing their own workout.
Students can access their free fitness center membership by visiting lcfitness.ca. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Some faith leaders in our province are again calling on a church in the Edmonton area to follow COVID-19 public health rules. This comes after Pastor James Coates of the Grace Life Church was charged with breaking the Public Health Act. He's accused of hosting services with as many as 300 people in violation of COVID-19 health orders. Reverend Scott Sharman with the Anglican Diocese of Edmonton is one of a few dozen faith leaders who signed a letter encouraging all Albertans, regardless of faith, to follow the advice of medical experts. A Calgary-based group is in court challenging parts of Manitoba's Public Health Act and how it's being used to deal with the pandemic. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms is arguing the law gives Manitoba's Chief Public Health Officer limitless power and little oversight. The centre filed the challenge in December and is representing 7 churches along with pastoral staff who've all been fined under the health orders.
We're going to force the governments to make their case to justify their action, which they're required to do under the Charter. A government cannot do whatever it wants, whatever it feels like. Government needs rational, scientific, evidence-based reasons if they want to justify any of our rights and freedoms. And when it comes to this virus, when you look at the government data and statistics, there's just no basis for this extreme response that is just disproportionate to the threat of a virus that is literally harmless to about 90% of the Canadian population.
John Carpe says they're looking for legislative changes that would require public consultation on the impacts of the new health orders and for the province to give scientific evidence of the need for the orders. Many of the prairie provinces have been dealing with extreme cold right now. Temperatures of -30 to -40 degrees is not uncommon. Now, thanks to the bitterly cold in Saskatchewan, the province set a new record for natural gas consumption. The new record of 1.57 petajoules reported by Sask Energy beat their previous record of 1.55 set on January 15th of last year. A petajoule is a unit of measurement that represents 1 million gigajoules. The average home uses around 100 gigajoules of natural gas each and every year. I gotta tell you, my natural gas furnace has been going nonstop the last 3 or 4 days or so. The extreme cold warning continued in our region today. We are way below our normal temperature for this time of year, but fortunately, a warm front is headed our way. Full weather details are coming up. You know, some people have been calling our city Lethbridge because of the very cold temperatures right now. Yeah, I know we're not alone when it comes to this polar vortex. It's covered most of the prairies. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, we just have to get through, a few more days of this bitterly cold temperatures before seeing more seasonal values?
Yeah, that's right, Hal. If we can just make it through the weekend, then we can see temperatures rising to around 0 and even the pluses by early next week. So can't wait for that. But until then, this is what we have to deal with. -35 is our overnight low. It could feel more like minus 45. So -35 is the overnight low. -45 is what it's going to feel like with that wind chill. So definitely plug in your car. Hopefully your block heater is working, as we are still under that extreme cold warning for much of Alberta. That is mainly what we're going to be seeing for the most part of this week into Thursday. High of -28. Sunshine though. We're going to have some sunny days Thursday, Friday, Saturday, but the temperatures not so great. -24, -22. Of course, going to be feeling more in the -30s 20s and minus 40s with that wind chill. Minus 13, the expected high for Sunday. And then into early next week, we're going to climb to 0 for Monday. And like I said before, 1 degree for Tuesday, which will put us back in that seasonal average for this time of year. So average high is 1, average low minus 11. 13 was our high temperature on this day back in 1987, and in 1939 rather, we had our coldest day on record, which was minus 38. Sun rose this morning at 7:50, and our sunset tonight will be at 5:41 p.m. So days getting longer. Nice to hear about that. Okay, what's happening in BC? So there is an Arctic outflow warning over BC. What does that mean? It basically means that there's a pressure system building up in BC that's pushing Arctic air into it. Extreme cold there. I know these temperatures don't look that cold in Vancouver and Victoria, but they are going to feel that wind chill. And again, as we were saying earlier with both Edmonton and Calgary, all of Alberta experiencing that major extreme cold. So that includes our cities closest to us as well. Saskatoon, minus 27, minus 26 in Regina, minus 25, the expected high tomorrow in Winnipeg. So the rest of the prairies also experiencing those frigid, extreme cold temperatures. Minus 4 is the expected high in Toronto. Minus 9 in Ottawa tomorrow with some flurries, minus 7 in Montreal. Now, these temperatures don't look too bad, but keep in mind with the wind chill, they could be experiencing temperatures more like in the minus teens in the afternoon and minus 20s overnight and in the morning. Fredericton's high tomorrow, minus 8, minus 5 in Halifax, minus 9 in Charlottetown. Could get a bit of wind there as well as some flurries. St. John's expecting about 70 km/h winds tomorrow with a high of minus 4. So there you go. That is your forecast.
Today's weather is brought to you, rain or shine, by the Gym in the North. Start your New Year's resolution today.
General Motors' net profit fell 4.5% last year, but a strong second half more than offset the effects of pandemic-related factory closures and a costly airbag recall. The Detroit automaker says it made $6.43 billion US as demand for its vehicles surged late. It says inventory ran short despite efforts to make up for lost production after its factories reopened in May. It was able to turn a big profit because buyers bought more expensive trucks and SUVs and loaded them with options. Precision Drilling says its fourth quarter loss widened to $37.5 million from $1.1 million a year earlier. The company says the loss came as its revenue fell 46% to $201.7 million. Precision says activity declined across all of its operating segments with reduced customer drilling programs due to the slowdown from the pandemic. It says, however, that industry outlook has improved due to the reopening of economies and steadily increasing commodity prices. Quaker Oats says its Aunt Jemima brand pancake mix and syrup will be renamed Pearl Milling Company. Aunt Jemima products will continue to be sold until June, when the packaging will officially change over. The division of PepsiCo announced last June that it would retire the Aunt Jemima brand, saying the character's origins are based on a racial stereotype. A former slave, Nancy Green, became the first face of the pancake products in 1890. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 49 points in the day to finish at 18,457. The Dow was up 61 points to 31,437. The S&P 500 was down 1 point to 3909, and the Nasdaq was down 35 points on the day to 13,972. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 32 cents to 58.68 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 8 cents to 2.91 US. Gold was also up 8 cents to 1842.98 US an ounce, and silver was unchanged on the day at 27.03 US an ounce. Wheat is at $305 per metric ton, barley's at $307, canola's at $683, and corn is at $337 per metric ton. Live cattle were down $1.32 to $116.13. Feeder cattle were up 85 cents to $139.50, and lean hogs were up 95 cents to $73.55. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 78.74 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Lethbridge police have ruled the death of a 65-year-old city man a homicide. Police responded to a home in the 1200 block of 4th Avenue South at 1:18 a.m. on Monday after a report of someone screamed for help. they discovered the body of a man inside of the residence. The death was confirmed suspicious, and the medical examiner's office in Calgary confirmed the cause of death as a homicide. Police have arrested and have taken a man into custody in relation to the ongoing investigation. Coming up, political reporter Brian Lilly gives us an update on the vaccine shortage in our country and why the UK is far ahead of Canada in providing a COVID-19 vaccine for its people. That Q&A is on deck. Vaccines appear to be a major problem for the Trudeau Liberals this week, or lack thereof. Political reporter Brian Lilly joins me now to talk more about it. Brian, the feds attempted to spin the announcement that vials of Pfizer vaccine were 6 doses instead of 5 as a good news story, but you say this is actually bad news.
Yeah, because we're not getting any extra doses. We're not going to get suddenly an extra 20% of doses. What we're getting is a reduced number of vials. So each vial, and the little tiny medicine bottle, and they put the syringe in, they pull it out. We've all seen it on TV. Pfizer had those approved as containing 5 doses. Now, anytime I'm told a pharmaceutical manufacturer makes something like that, they always put a little bit more in because the way the needles work and the fact that the liquid will stick to the bottle and to the needle, there's a bit that you can't draw out. Well, skilled technicians started using dead space needles that don't waste as much, and were able to get 6 doses out. So Pfizer said, oh, well, if you're getting 6 doses, we're going to relabel the bottle. Now, they had to ask for Health Canada approval to do that in Canada, and they've had to do that with regulators around the world. Health Canada said yes. The problem is a number of provinces say, look, this is not a sure thing, that quite often we can't get the 6 dose. I know that Dr. Dina Hinshaw in Alberta has said it's about 50% of the time. Now, with the right needle and a skilled technician, it improves, but still only 75% of the time. So we will still be getting the 4 million doses of Pfizer, but it'll be fewer vials because they're now counting each vial as 6. Not every province, not every health unit will be able to get 6 doses out of every bottle. So this is a really bad news story for Canada when it comes to vaccines, at a time when we've got a lot of bad news stories when it comes to vaccines.
Now, apparently there are also some issues as well with Canada getting the vaccines that we ordered, Brian. Have there been some issues maybe with the delivery? Should we maybe use DoorDash or skip the dishes perhaps?
They might be quicker, but the problem is not the delivery company. Some of the best delivery companies in the world working on this file, but the doses just aren't there. And so you'll recall it was, 2 weeks ago now that we had 0 doses for the entire country of the Pfizer vaccine. Last week we had 79,000 for the whole country, and this week we'll get 70,000 doses for the entire country. Next week that's supposed to pick up. And while they were talking about 360,000 doses, they're now saying, no, it will be, and they're counting the new 6 dose and saying it'll be more. But we're still having trouble with Moderna. Moderna reduced it by 50,000 doses last week. For the week of February 22nd, when their next batch is supposed to arrive, they can't tell us how many we'll get or if the delivery will be on time. So these problems persist. The government puts out a planning document that they share with the provinces on a regular basis, and last week they removed all scheduled deliveries for the month of March.
Now, Brian, you recently wrote about how Britain is so far ahead of Canada in vaccinating its population against COVID-19, and it was partly due to Oxford's AstraZeneca's vaccine. Now, how did Britain become a leader, and why are we not using that vaccine?
Well, they helped develop it. It was developed at the University of Oxford in partnership with pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca, and they approved it. We have still yet to approve the AstraZeneca vaccine. We've agreed to take it from COVAX, that international system that we thought was supposed to be about helping developing countries get vaccines. So we're going to take it from there, but we haven't approved it. In Britain, they took a very different approach to fighting COVID-19. Now, in some things, I'll admit, I've heard from a lot of readers, yeah, but they failed on this. I'm talking about vaccines now. Back on May 16th, the same day that Justin Trudeau first spoke about the deal with CanSino, the Chinese firm, on that same day, Britain announced that they were building a permanent vaccination, manufacturing, and innovation center. That will open this coming summer. but they also announced more than $60 million for a temporary vaccine manufacturing facility. They took an old building, they retrofitted it, and they are ready to produce vaccines. They put money behind AstraZeneca and Oxford. That vaccine is now being made at a therapeutics firm. It's not a vaccine manufacturing firm, and it's being bottled at another place. Our government said, our facilities don't work, we can't do it. They didn't start asking vaccine manufacturers to manufacture here until August and September. And at that point, it was just too late. So the UK took a, let's get the best of Britain together and do this, and took a can-do attitude. We took a can't-do attitude, and now it's hurting us because we could be manufacturing a vaccine like AstraZeneca or Johnson & Johnson on Canadian soil if we had done it properly.
Now, we know the Europeans have export controls in place and could cut us off at any time. But what about the United States? They're making vaccines there. Have the Trudeau Liberals sought to get supplies from the Americans?
Well, they're not saying, but there are readouts of calls. And of course, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was the first foreign leader that Joe Biden called after his inauguration. The readout from the White House doesn't mention vaccines. But the readout from Justin Trudeau's office, from the PMO, does say that he and the American president discussed vaccines. Then there was a call between Trudeau and U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, and they discussed access to vaccines. So what it looks like happened is perhaps they've asked and been turned down, and they don't want to discuss that. So the Americans are not discussing vaccines. They are saying, look, we want the global population to be healthy, but we're vaccinating our people first. And so there's a Pfizer plant in Kalamazoo, Michigan. It's about 200 kilometers from the border between Windsor and Detroit. You know, you could send a truck down there and get all kinds of doses. And the Americans, quite frankly, wouldn't miss those or Moderna doses because they've distributed more than 60 million vaccine doses at this point and vaccinated more than 40 million people. But, you know, they're still producing them faster than they can use them. So we could take a couple days supply and they wouldn't notice, and it would do Canada a world of good. But the Biden administration has an America First policy, just like the Trump administration did. So for all those people that said, oh, it'll be so much better once we get rid of that bad orange man, well, here's news for you. The new guy is a lot like the old guy on this, and we're being left out in the cold.
So Brian, what about the Made in Canada solution when it comes to vaccines, the one coming out of Montreal? The Canadian-made vaccine, what's the latest?
Well, that's an American firm that's going to come here and produce at a facility in Montreal. Now, when Prime Minister Trudeau first announced this, he made it sound like it was going to be something that would happen in the summer. And, you know, that was the teaser ahead of his announcement. Then at his announcement, he said, well, I think the fall it'll be ready. Then his foreign minister, his industry minister, Francois-Philippe Champagne, said, well, actually, December. And then the National Research Council, this is all the same day, Hal, the National Research Council came out and said, well, we hope to have engineering on the building done by December and production will take place after that. So it'll be 2022 before we get that vaccine going. It's not going to help us for dealing with what we've got going right now, which is a lack of vaccines and a definite need, especially to get our most vulnerable vaccinated. You know, once that happens, we can start returning to normal in a much quicker way, but we need those doses.
Now, we heard the announcement a couple of weeks ago that Canadians landing at the 4 airports taking international flights would have to get tested when they land and then they'd stay at a hotel at their own expense. Now, that's not actually set up yet, but we keep hearing stories from Calgary and Toronto of people being forced to stay in hotels. Why is that?
Well, that's because they're coming in with the wrong test. So there are already places set up for people who do not have proof that they had a negative PCR test. And so I know my colleagues at the Calgary Sun have been writing about what happened with, I believe it was a pastor and his wife and some other people. And
yeah, the Mathis family, that's right, yeah.
Yes.
Chris and Nicole Mathis, that's correct, yeah. Yeah, she had the antigen test, right? Yeah, instead of the PCR.
Same thing here in Toronto. Joe Warmington in the Toronto Sun had a story of a guy who he landed, thought he had a COVID test. He did, but it was an antigen test. Most of us would not know the difference if it bit us in the behind. But I know the difference because I'm immersed in this daily. But the average person, are they really getting the right information? Is the government clear enough? It must be a PCR test. And so these people are landing, they present the paperwork and they say, but that's not good enough. You need a PCR test. You're going in that hotel. Now, my understanding is that right now they're not getting the $2,000 hotel bill that the feds have promised will be coming. So they're not having to pay for it. But you are not allowed to leave. There are security guards everywhere. You don't get to choose the food you eat. They just drop some food off. It's not exactly what a lot of people would be expecting. It's been quite the shock to anybody whose story I've heard.
Brian, since long-term care facilities were some of the hardest hit during the COVID-19 pandemic, there have been calls for national standards, but that is something that Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole really opposes. Why is that?
He opposes it because he said this is provincial jurisdiction and that an Ottawa knows best approach just won't work. And quite frankly, I think he's right. Look, one of the reasons that our long-term care facilities have been the hardest hit is because this is a virus that hits elderly people with underlying conditions the hardest. Who lives in long-term care facilities? People who are in their later years who have health problems. You don't go to long-term care because you're a shining example of health. You go because you need that additional level of medical treatment on a daily basis. This vaccine is deadly for people in that condition. The fact that we didn't have more people die in the general population outside of long-term care is a testament to the fact that Canada generally handled COVID-19 well, comparatively speaking to other countries. Long-term care is the exception because they're prone to it. But the feds have said they want to come in with a couple $2 billion to solve all the problems, but you've got to take national standards. The premiers say, well, wait a minute. You're not funding the healthcare system that we've got already. You're not funding that properly. You won't pay your full bill on that. What makes you think you can come in and take over another section of our jurisdiction, just throw some money at it, and then impose standards and walk away? There have to be fixes in long-term care. I know here in Ontario, some of the regulations have not been updated since 1972 when I was 1 year old. I think maybe things have changed in the world of air conditioning and HVAC and air filtration since that time. In fact, we didn't have air conditioning. Most of us didn't have it back then. Some of these homes didn't have it. We've got to make fixes, but having the federal government and a bureaucrat in Ottawa tell every long-term care facility across the country how they should operate, that's not the solution.
The Canadian Embassy in China issued an apology for what was deemed an offensive T-shirt. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I've seen this design online over the last year, and I don't know if you have. It's the design of the logo of the hip-hop group Wu-Tang Clan. And instead of Wu-Tang, it says Wuhan. Now, the logo for Wu-Tang Clan kind of looks like a bat anyway, and so that just adds to what I think is a pretty clever, hilarious little T-shirt. But some staff members working in the diplomatic section in China for the government of Canada ordered some of these T-shirts. Well, that became a story in Chinese state media. The Chinese government expressed outrage. How dare you? My response to them would not have been an apology. Let's put it this way. They are kidnapping dictators. I'm not going to apologize to them. Unfortunately, that's not the direction the Trudeau government took. They decided to issue an apology. After the apology, People's Daily in China, the government-owned newspaper, tweeted out a comment from the foreign ministry saying, Canada should take this as a lesson and make sure this never happens again. They weren't even gracious in the face of an apology. They can go pound sand next time, as far as I'm concerned.
Now, Brian, speaking of China, Canada's top spy reports that China remains a serious threat to Canada since the Asian nation is determined to steal secrets and intimidate opponents.
And you know what? While our embassy was apologizing for a T-shirt, the Chinese embassy in Ottawa was issuing a threat to Canadian media outlets saying, don't give voice to people who support Taiwan or democracy activists in Hong Kong. Yeah, they try and intimidate absolutely everybody who goes against the kidnapping dictators in Beijing. You are not allowed to speak out against them, especially if you're a Chinese citizen. or Chinese national who's moved here and still has family back there. They will intimidate you here, they will intimidate your family back home and try and make sure that you are not spreading messages that they don't like. At the same time, China has long been a horrible industrial spy in this country. There is a great deal of excellent evidence that the fall of Nortel is a direct result of China stealing secrets from that once great Canadian tech giant. I don't think it's outrageous to say that Nortel's demise and Huawei's rise on some of the same technology is not a coincidence. There has been reports from Bloomberg, Reuters, and other great reporting in the business press on this over the years. But that's not the only company that they do it to. They will steal any sort of intelligence they can to build their economy and hurt ours. And Canadians need to remember that. I think too often we forget.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Hal.
Personal privacy has never been so much at risk as it is today, especially with the increasing use of social media. Apparently, there is now even facial recognition technology being used that can discern your political leanings. Is there something we could and should do about this? Today's guest is Sharon Polsky. She is the president of the Privacy and Access Council of Canada and joins me via Zoom from Calgary. Sharon, thanks so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure, Jeanette.
Now, Sharon, it's hard to keep up with our ever-changing technology that threatens our personal privacy. One of those social media giants, Instagram, has been making headlines recently with some changes to its user agreement. If I understand correctly, Instagram has the right to remove, edit, block, monitor the content in your account. Is this actually the case?
I hate to say it, but this is nothing new. The so-called, and I say that for a reason, the so-called privacy policies that we see on just about every website are written in such a way as to give the viewer, you and me, this sense of comfort that they're going to treat our personal information ever so carefully as we might want it to be treated. But when you look at how it's actually written, the terminology is pretty darn vague. I have, and I'm not kidding, I have seen some of them that say, and we will use your information for any purpose not prohibited by law. Doesn't even say in what country. So anything goes, really. And the problem is this model of consent is kind of coercive. If you want to use whatever platform, whatever software, whatever app, whatever bank, car, you have no choice but to agree to their terms. It's not as if we can say, yes, I agree to A, B, and C, but clause S, I'm not too keen on. Can we remove that? It's all or nothing. And unfortunately, our privacy commissioner's hands are tied because that's all the law requires.
That's really scary and alarming. Are people aware that they're agreeing to allow Instagram and other outlets to view and analyze things through your front camera and your microphone and copy your address book and call log and texting history?
Generally, no, because the language is so vague and fuzzy. We will collect information from you and about you. About me from what sources? Public sources. What public? And most of these organizations are outside of Canada, so outside of the albeit limited protection of our privacy laws. And I mean, there's so many people who have never known a day of existence where they haven't heard the message that there is no such thing as privacy, nobody cares. On one hand, it's true. Technology has provided tremendous benefit and the potential for good is unimaginable. But technology is just a tool. It's how we use it or abuse it that makes the difference.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. And I know we're talking about Instagram. Is this also true of Facebook? Like, I know we're hearing that Instagram can use any of your photos or videos in any way or manner that they wish. I would imagine that's Facebook too, since they are owned by Facebook, right?
That's right. And if you look into the many pages long privacy policy, somewhere in it, you will generally see language that says, we will share your information with our affiliates. without telling us who those affiliates might be. It might be companies within the umbrella of the head office. It might be third-party companies that use their services or provide services or help market. We don't know.
Yeah, because they could use your picture in an ad without us even knowing it, right?
That has happened more than once. I've heard of people who an ad will pop up on their feed and their spouse will go, "Excuse me, but why is your face on this dating site?"
Oh my gosh.
Because you can set your privacy settings, and I encourage everybody to go through the privacy settings on every app, on your phone, and every time they update the system, the operating system, because sometimes things change slightly. So double check every time. It only takes a few minutes. And deep in all of the language, it says that we'll use your images, we own it. You have total control over that portion of our service that you have access to, but they subtly separate it from what you can do and what they allow themselves to do with your information. So you can set your privacy settings so that nobody you don't want can see your feed. That doesn't prevent Facebook, Google, any of them from doing as they wish with it, because that's the terms that we've agreed to.
Right. So besides setting your privacy on your account, I guess, what else can Instagram or Facebook users do about this?
Well, of course, there's always the choice of downloading all of your content, requesting that they delete it, do everything you have to delete it. On the Privacy and Access Council of Canada's website, there is some guidance as to how to do these things. But that's like saying somebody's stalking you, so you have to change your phone number. I think the more effective way, especially now that the Government of Canada, Ontario, Alberta, British Columbia, Newfoundland, they're all looking at either major overhauls of the privacy laws or introducing new ones. I think it's up to all of us to take the time to understand what's at stake, what we've given away, and get in touch with our elected representatives at all levels of government. Because unless and until not only the lawmakers, but the bureaucrats who typically write the laws and create the briefing notes for the elected representatives to go by, until they understand that it really does matter to us, that people do indeed care about our own privacy, until they hear that from us, then they just spin it as there's no objection, therefore people agree with what's going on till now.
Yeah, absolutely. I know there's been people leaving the sites over that. And hats off to them. I understand why.
Yeah, we have to get really vocal and speak out. I know it's scary and people think, well, if I say something, what can one person's voice do? It makes a difference. It truly does.
Yeah. What about the recent COVID restrictions? Are there any privacy and civil liberty concerns we should be concerned about? How safe are government tracing apps and the Stats Canada blood sample surveys, for example? I mean, there's so much going on, right?
Well, you mentioned the StatsCan survey. A concerned acquaintance sent me the one that they received, and it's I wonder, it comes with half a dozen Band-Aids. I mean, you're gonna poke yourself once. Some people do bleed a lot, however, and it talks about how important the survey is, and I agree, it is, and that the Stats Canada cannot reveal your information. That excludes, it completely ignores that if the police came to Stats Canada with a warrant, I think they would have to comply with the warrant or go to court to challenge it at least. There's a lot of information that isn't revealed in these things. Alberta, I've had concerns from the outset with the Alberta Trace Together app, because once you download the app and you register to use it, if you decide that you don't want to use it anymore, you can delete it from your phone, but you're still in the province's records. You have to get out of the system, you have to send an email requesting that you be deleted from the province's system.
Wow.
And then they have your email address that they might not have had before. Once, and of course, again, they talk about all the information being private and secure and confidential, and guaranteeing security is something no organization should do, because eventually it isn't possible.
Yeah.
But in any event, once they do get your information, the province's health information laws don't give us any say in what happens. And more than that, the Public Health Act allows that the Chief Medical Officer of Health, and this applies in Alberta, Ontario, most jurisdictions across Canada, once our information is in the hands of the Chief Medical Officer of Health, they have authority under the law to reveal your information with other governments in Canada and abroad, with our other organizations and individuals in Canada and abroad, for all sorts of purposes, including general public interest.
Wow.
We have to rely on their good common sense, their decency, their sense of ethics and morals. But we've seen throughout the pandemic that globally governments are imposing all sorts of restrictions. I was talking with my father a few days ago. He lives in Montreal. He's into his 90s, still has all of his faculties, his marbles. He's great. And I said, so what we're hearing in the West about what's going on in Quebec sometimes doesn't have much bearing to reality. So is it really the case the police are stopping people and saying, like they did in Germany, papers, please? Prove where you live, prove where you work, prove that you have good reason to be where you are. And he said, yes, that is happening.
Right.
That is abhorrent.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that, because we've been hearing that in certain provinces, Canadians are having to show their papers and prove where they live and where they work and justify why they're out in public. And some say it seems reminiscent of Nazi Germany. Is this justified?
Well, keep in mind, when China started about a year ago, they started requiring people to show a QR code on their cell phone. It was either green, yellow, or red. Green, you can go about your business. Yellow, you have to report to the authorities. Red, don't even go out. Algorithms calculated and generated the QR code that would display. First of all, it presumes everybody has a modern enough cell phone that can handle QR codes. Leave that aside. In the West, people were aghast that a government would do such a thing. How horrible. And now they're talking about requiring this sort of thing to be allowed to come and go freely within our own country, within our own municipalities, to go into a building, into a grocery store. That's what I'm hearing is the next thing. You have to prove that you've had some sort of either a test that's negative or an immunity passport. This is insane.
Right. It doesn't appear to be a free country. It seems more like a police state. But it also seems like in some recent surveys, it indicates that some Canadians believe that this is actually justified.
Oh, yes, I've seen some surveys as well. We seldom get to see the actual questions. And typically it's, 1,000 Canadians. Which ones? How were they selected? It's like, we've surveyed Manitoba residents. Which ones? The ones across the table from you? How about a broad cross section? I've been in this business too long. I'm maybe a little skeptical or realistic. But yes, some surveys that say Canadians are in favor of curfews, whether they actually understand what all that entails. Yet a majority of those people believe that it won't do any good to stem the continued spread of COVID. So what is it that they are agreeing with? And keeping in mind that the information our governments at many levels have been allowing out, they are controlling the messaging and have from day one, to the point that the federal government within a matter of weeks either completely closed down the access to information departments, or basically said, no, if you don't get an answer, it's because there's a pandemic. We'll deal with it after. So we're not even allowed to know what the law says we're supposed to be able to do, is gain access to information held by the governments that we hire to represent our views.
Right.
And serve us.
There's just so much going on, and including facial recognition. So Sharon, can you tell us about some recent claims that facial recognition technology can discern your political leanings?
Well, fortunately, at this point, it's just research that has done a comparison between a facial recognition identifying whether you are conservative or liberal versus human guessing what your face says, what your political leanings might be, and pure chance. So theoretically, the researchers say that it's much more accurate. A human guess is something around 50%. And this is, again, up into the 70-ish% accuracy.
That's
Do we really need
incredible.
that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, Sharon, it looks like we are out of time. I could go on and ask you questions all day because there's so many questions to ask, but we really, really appreciate having you on our show.
Well, thank you. It's so important for everybody to understand not only the benefits of the potential in our technologies, but the risks to us personally and professionally and our families. So thank you for this.
Absolutely. We always appreciate your expertise. Sharon Polsky is the president of the Privacy and Access Council of Canada. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.